From the EBKV studios in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, you're listening to Brotherly Pod, the official podcast of BrotherlyPuck.com. Welcome, everybody, to the Angry and Negative Show. I'm your host, Dan the Flyer Fan. With me, as always, my co-host, Angry Jim. Jim, how you doing tonight?
I'm great. Huge win last night. Tough luck they didn't get a win Monday night, but what are you going to do? They made up for it last night. How you doing?
I am doing good. Much better than I was over the weekend. Not feeling as sick as I have been. Ready to do this show. As for the Flyers, they have kept their very slim playoff hopes alive. They are 26-24-7 through 57 games this season. They have 25 games left. They are 13 points out of first place, 8 points out of third place, and 6 points out of the second wildcard spot, which is currently in a struggle. Pittsburgh has it right now. Carolina is 1 point behind them. Buffalo 2 points behind Pittsburgh for that second wildcard spot. The Flyers' playoff chances currently at 2%. They were at 4.3% during our last episode last Wednesday. They fell to 1.5% after the loss to Pittsburgh. They are up back to 2% after the win against Minnesota. You know, I brought this up on Twitter after the Penguins game. You know, they won 8 straight games. They were then 9-0-1 after 10. And it felt like, even though their odds were so slim at, less than 5%, it felt like they really, truly had a chance. Then they take the heartbreaking loss to Pittsburgh, and all of a sudden it put everything into reality that they essentially needed to go undefeated for the rest of the season. I believe it was something like 20-10 over their last 30 games to even have a shot. Then they lost, and all of a sudden that one loss puts in perspective just how slim their actual odds were.
Yeah, and that's a great point by you, because I'm kind of a hopeless optimist. So when I see, they're only out of the playoffs by 6 or 8 points, I always tend to look over the teams that are in front of them. And teams like Carolina, who are playing very well at the moment, Buffalo, Columbus, I think they all won last night, where the Flyers had a chance to make up 2 points again. It's going to be tough. They're going to have to pass these teams and hope that they lose a couple games at the same time. And it's not like they're exactly 2 points behind these guys. I think they're 3 and 4 points behind Carolina and Buffalo as well. So when you have a chance to play a team like Pittsburgh, who's directly in front of you, even though you're coming off a 9-0-1 point streak, I think that's a game you absolutely have to win. You have to beat the teams that are directly in front of you. It's essentially a 4-point swing, whereas if they were to win Monday night and win last night, they're looking at only being behind Pittsburgh by 2 points. I know Pittsburgh's playing Edmonton tonight, so whatever happens in that game, they'd be out 2 points as of now. They lost, and they're still behind by 6. So that was a huge game, a huge jump, and it's unfortunate that they lost.
Yeah, the Flyers are 5 points behind the Hurricanes and 6 behind Pittsburgh. So yeah. It's not looking good. Their upcoming schedule, they have a home-and-home with Detroit this weekend. No reason why they shouldn't win both of those games. Then they play they have a really tough stretch coming up. They play Tampa, Montreal, Pittsburgh again, Buffalo, Columbus. That week and a half is going to be killer, especially if they lose even one of those games. I mean, their hopes are essentially gone. They need to, I think I brought it up earlier, they need to go essentially undefeated for the rest of the season to even have a chance to make it into the playoffs. And it's heartbreaking knowing that they're on such an uphill battle, even though they really have turned it around over the past month or so.
Yeah, that's a great point. What they can do is, they set themselves up to be in this position. They don't necessarily control their own destiny, but they have their work cut out for them, especially with the upcoming schedule, like you mentioned. They beat a couple of these teams, and they're right in the thick of it, Right now, I still consider them on the outside looking in. They're not quite in the playoff race, but they're not too far behind. If they can win a couple of those games next week, you said it, if they win all of them, I think it's going to be pretty tough for them to beat Tampa. They definitely have to win both games this weekend. I think there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Going into Tampa, if they can steal a point, and then who'd you say they have coming up next? Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Columbus?
Tampa, Montreal, Pittsburgh, Buffalo,
Montreal.
and Columbus. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's some points out there. I think they beat Montreal. They played them pretty well a couple weeks ago. Tampa's going to be tough. We already know. Columbus, I think, is a team that they can beat. I think Columbus came here twice and beat us twice, if I'm not mistaken. But that is a winnable game. Yeah, so they have their work cut out. I mean, they're fortunate to be in the position that they're in, considering how the season's gone up until the last month or so.
Yeah, Detroit is pretty much done at this point. They are 22, 28, and 7 on the season, nowhere near the playoff hunt. You got the Lightning, who are far and away the best team in the NHL this season, at least during the regular season, until they blow it in the playoffs, like I'm guaranteeing they're going to do. Montreal currently holds the first wildcard spot. Pittsburgh currently holds a second wildcard spot. Sabres are trailing for the second wildcard spot by 2 points. And then Columbus is... Hey, they are in the third spot in the Metro, the third place
Blue
in the Metro.
Jackets.
So, certainly going to be a very tough week ahead of them, week and a half. It's not impossible, especially the way Carter Hart has been playing. You would think that if he sees a majority of these games, which I assume he will, it's not impossible, but man, this is tough. And, things do slow down a little bit after that. They play Devils, Islanders twice, Capitals, Senators, Capitals again. Good Lord. Maybe it doesn't slow down. Never mind. They have a couple days off after that good 5 games here. But after that, it is it's a rough season. This is certainly not built for them to just walk in and sneak into the playoffs. They are going to have to fight to even have that 2% chance.
Yeah, seriously. Hey, you know what? After the Tampa Bay game, why not start another 9 or 8 game winning streak?
Hey,
Why not?
This is the first show you and I have done that the Flyers are not on a win streak.
Yeah, I don't know what's up
Crazy.
with that. I mean, who knows? The curse is up.
The prediction was right for 3 weeks, which I think is
Yeah.
crazy by itself. Well, let's go back. We last did a show last Wednesday. Flyers have played 4 games since then. They had the shootout loss to the Kings. Quite frankly, they had no business being in that game to begin with. They brought it to a shootout. Thought they won due to a phantom goal, but that was reviewed. It did make it under the post. They then lost thanks to Jonathan Quick, who was strong on his end. That was a game that, it hurt them at the time, but they managed to get a point. They faced Anaheim on Saturday. They crushed them 6-2, thankfully, because I thought for sure that was going to be a trap game, given that Anaheim has won 2 games since the middle of December. They had the heartbreaker against Pittsburgh. We'll dive into that a little further in a minute, 4-1, but that essentially slashed whatever playoff hopes they have into the ground. They had a, pardon the pun, but a wild win over Minnesota last night. Let's go back to that Pittsburgh game. There was quite a few things to talk about there. Murray had 50 of 51 saves. There was the BS no goal on Nolan Patrick that was whistle blown too early. Malkin was suspended 1 game after trying to decapitate Michael Raffl via hockey stick. What were your thoughts on the Penguins game?
So I was actually in attendance at the Wells Fargo Center for that game, and I gotta tell you, like, I didn't see 51 shots from the Flyers. I don't know what the
It didn't feel like it watching on TV either, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, either they weren't quality scoring chances, or they just kept hitting the button up there. I don't know what the hell was going on, but I looked up and saw 28 shots in the second, and I'm like, is that right? There's no way. Not that they played horrible, but I just didn't see 51 shots. And I don't think Matt Murray, I don't think he's really stood on his head or anything. Maybe the shots that they had on goal weren't necessarily scoring chances, which I think is a little bit more important than 50 shots, because you can have 50 shots and have 5 scoring chances. I didn't look up that number. But just from what I saw, I'm going to imagine it's not that high. Uh, what I did see, I happened to be sitting down the end where, Crosby scored in typical Crosby fashion, where he was the only one that knew he had the puck and nobody else knew where the hell it was. So that was,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and I happened to be down there for the Patrick no goal too. And to me, I saw a goal. I didn't hear a whistle. I know it was blown, but the place got so loud. I was confused. I thought they were reviewing the goal just to make sure it crossed the line. And then when everybody found out that they couldn't even review it because the jackass of a referee blew his whistle because he thought the goalie had it in his glove, he never had it in his glove.
Yeah.
That was one of the worst calls. That's top 5 worst calls I've ever seen in my life. Like, you have to have some sort of possession to blow the whistle. The puck, it flies in one end of his glove and flies out the other. I don't know how you could blow the whistle that fast. I have no idea. Um, so then to keep this rolling here, we have Evgeny Malkin or Gino, whatever you want to call him. What's the guy's name from? Oh my God, from the Goonies. What the hell's that? What's his name?
Oh, the thing in the basement. What the fuck was his name?
Yeah, we could call him that because he is one of the ugliest mother effers I've ever seen in my life. Sloth, yeah.
There you go.
Sloth Malkin. So, I mean, I can almost understand why he's so angry because I can't imagine how many times a day. Like, it's so easy to pick on him. Like, he's the ugliest person in the NHL. So, I mean, he's getting like a couple noogies. Like, those weren't punches. Like, give me a friggin' break, dude. Like, that's not a punch. Or even if it is, it's a closed fist. He's pushing your head. He's punching you. Let's call it a punch. Dude, turn around and fight him like a man. If he's really pissing you off, I mean, don't swing your stick. That could really do some damage. You could knock somebody the F out with that, dude. You could knock some teeth out at the very least, break a nose. Chris Pronger had to retire because he caught a stick in the eye. Like, give me a break with that. And then to only get one game, there's like Jack mentioned in the earlier show I did. There's a GIF about Malkin swinging his stick. I mean, he was up for. They should have reviewed the hit he had on Oshie just this year. I believe it was back in November. Malkin had possession of the puck, saw Oshie coming, and sticks his elbow out. I think Oshie ended up missing a couple games. I mean, we see Malkin enough to where we see this kind of shit happen all the time. So that came as no surprise to me. I almost laughed at it because it's typical Malkin. But it's got to stop. A one-game suspension for all the shit that Malkin's done in the past is a slap on the wrist, man. And I guess what's good now is because now that this is recorded, now that it's okay, you've got one game. The next time he does this, he's a repeat offender. So I guess if there's anything that comes out of this, because one game is BS. That's like a vacation for him. He gets to relax. If he ever does this again, he's going to get 3 games, 5 games, So I guess that's a positive to take out of it. But that's typical Malkin. Nothing new for me.
Yeah, the 28 shots that the Flyers faced in the second, or 28 shots they had on goal in the second period was a record for a single period in Flyers history. I can't find anything about the quality of the shots off looking at this page. But, yeah, the Malkin slash, I mean, goddamn, he could have ended Raffles' career if he hit him square on. And
in the temple.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, man.
Temple could have been his eye, his nose, mouth. Jesus. Could have caught him in the throat. Like, he could have done a lot more damage. I think, I was shocked that they actually gave him a suspension at all, just because he seems like the kind of guy that's gotten away with it. He's been in the league for, 12 years now, and this was his first. So,
unbelievable.
Yeah, it was certainly not a pretty sight. The Flyers then faced Minnesota last night, the day after the Penguins game, and the refs came back to have some fun in that one as well. They drew a double minor on, I believe it was Robert Haig, for a supposed slashing, even though it was the Minnesota Wild teammate who hit his own teammate in the face with a stick. That was another bullshit call that I can't believe happened. In this, let alone 24 hours after the Penguins game, which was left and right. It was just, that could have changed the whole game right there. Thankfully, the Flyers didn't get, buried by it, but goddamn, how many things can go wrong in 24 hours?
Yeah, that's a good point because if the Wild did end up scoring on those power plays, it would have changed the whole game, and I don't think the Flyers would have came back in that one, and that would have been devastating to their season. So to make a call like that is just a joke, quite frankly. It's ridiculous with all the technology that they have in today's. I mean, you have it in soccer, you have it in football. I think there's too much of it in football. But hockey, I think, could be a little bit behind with some of this stuff. To not be able to go back and review, did we make the right penalty call? Because a lot of people are upset here. I know for a fact in soccer, I'm not sure if anybody out there watches the World Cup or soccer in general, but the referees have a little microphone or a headset in their ear. When they make a call, if whoever's connected to that sees something different during that call, they'll phone in and let the referee know, hey, this happened, so you're wrong. You need to do this. What's the big deal with doing that with hockey? That would have saved, Hague wouldn't have been in the box for 4 minutes. They could have made the right call and played the game like it should have been played. Instead, the Flyers ended the period on the penalty kill, and they opened up the second on a penalty kill. That really could have changed the entire season if they lost that game last night because of that. So I think it's a joke. I think the NHL is a little bit behind. To say that this is the call we made, we can't go back and change it, I think that's just caveman. I think that's bullshit, and they need to get with the times a little bit. You have the technology, start friggin' using it.
I mean, even baseball is at a point now where they're reviewing, all kinds of questionable plays, and it's like, I get you don't want to be able to review everything after every play because it can get, like football where it just gets annoying, but, it's things like that where they're so obviously wrong that, like, come on, like, it's 2019, let's figure this shit out.
It takes away from the game, to be honest with you, because if you're watching that, like, as Flyers fans, we tend to think, and I'm sure most fans think this, but most calls go against us. That's how we feel. But when you see that, you're just like, are you kidding me? Like, it's a new level of what the F, pretty much. Like, how do you make that call? This coming the day after where they scored and the ref blows his whistle because he thinks he's got it in the glove. Like, give me a break, dude.
Well, the one thing that did happen during this stretch of games last week that we have not talked about, Dale Weiss and Christian Folin were traded to Montreal for defenseman David Schlemko and forward Byron Froese. Was an interesting move. Obviously, it gets rid of two more of Ron Hextall's boys in Folin and Weiss. It was essentially a move that worked out pretty evenly cap-wise. Christian Folin has on a 1-year, $800,000 deal. Dale Weiss has 1 year left at $2.35 million. David Schlemko has 1 year left at $2.1 million, and Froese is on his last year of a $650,000 deal. Schlemko, 31 years old, Froese, 27. Probably won't be at any point in the NHL. Schlemko will probably sit in the AHL, and Froese, I believe, is down with the Phantoms right now. What do you make of this trade?
When I first heard there was actually, I think it all started for me when they called up Phil Myers, I believe. There was speculation that they were going to call him up at the very least. And they were the Flyers never officially announced it. I think this news broke Saturday night after the Phantoms game, I believe. So there was a lot of people talking, there could be a trade coming, blah, blah, blah.
It happened Saturday morning because I went to the Phantoms game on Saturday night and he wasn't there. I was very disappointed.
That's right. So, Phil, the speculation that there's going to be a trade, and then the next day you hear there's a trade with Montreal, and I'm like, oh my God, I wonder if they just moved Radko Gudas because Montreal could use a defenseman like that.
Yes.
Turns out it's Weiss and Folin, and I'm not necessarily, I can't be mad about it. I mean, at first, Fletcher is trimming the fat in guys like Dale Weiss and sending him to the AHL. And then a guy like Folin, who was the seventh defenseman, I think it was a pretty solid trade. it allows you to call up a guy like Phil Myers, which I think was probably the main reason why the trade was made, and to get rid of a guy like Weiss. So I think he had another year left, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so solid trade. I'm not sure a guy like Schlemko ever sees the light of day on the Flyers roster, but God forbid if they do need a guy like him, he's down with the Phantoms. I'm not sure the term on his contract, but if he's around for next year, I think he's serviceable at the very least.
Yeah, Schlemko is around next year. He's 31 years old now. I think he'll be that guy. I think the Flyers' blue line is obviously very crowded. Maybe they, trim some of the fat this summer, as well as, figuring out who stays and who goes. As for the call-ups, you kind of touched upon it. Phil Myers and Justin Bailey were called up from the Phantoms. Corbin Knight was sent down. Justin Bailey did make it into the lineup last night versus Minnesota. He played 4 minutes and 44 seconds, 1 shot on goal, and a +1. Myers yet to make his debut. Scott Gordon has said that he plans on getting quite a few practices in to get him ready rather than just throw him out there cold. I think that's a good idea. I noticed quite a few people on Twitter were very angry when he was not in the game last night, but I think Gordon does have the right idea of, let's get this kid some practices, let's get him comfortable before you throw him in there just because you're going to throw him in there.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think if the season if it kept going the other way, I think it'd be a little easier to get him in the lineup. But as it stands, the Flyers still have some playoff hopes. I mean, they did call the kid up. It's not like they're going to sit him forever. They have a perfect opportunity this weekend with a back-to-back with Detroit, who's not one of the top teams in the league. They're more closer to the bottom, and I think it's a perfect opportunity to get him in. They give him a week to get acclimated. It's a different lifestyle in the NHL compared to the AHL. And I agree with what they're doing. They don't necessarily have a spot open for him. I mean, you could say he could play in place of McDonald, and I would agree. But there's no reason to force anything.
Yeah, I think it's going to take time. He'll probably squeeze in if we're lucky, McDonald. I have no idea who he would take out of the lineup right now, and I think that's the other one. If this was, I don't want to, how do you say it, a smart person, you would sit McDonald, you would sit Robert Haig, but, given that those two still seem to have their, favoritism under Gordon, I don't know who sits. I think, again, with any luck, you sit McDonald, you buy him out over the summer. You go into next season, you're going to trade maybe Gudas or Haig at the deadline, maybe over summer. We talked about this a little bit last week, but the best thing for the Flyers right now, I think, is just trying to fix their defense core. They really don't have a whole lot of prospects here as I pull up the rosters so I don't miss anybody. Flyers roster. So you got McDonald, who hopefully gets bought out. But right now their defense is Gostisbehere, Gudas, Haig, McDonald, Myers, Provorov, and Sanheim. The issue there is, the obvious one to sit out is McDonald or Haig, but they're still kind of coaching favorites. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see where Myers fits this year, who he plays with. He has been taking reps with Sam Morin during practice to get him warmed up, which that made me instantly happy when I saw that on Twitter. Obviously Gostisbehere has been struggling. Provorov has been getting better as of late, but overall, there's not a real spot where Myers can just get plugged in without moving some of the coach's favorites.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a good problem to have because Gudas hasn't necessarily been playing horrible. He's actually been playing pretty well. Andy McDonald, I'm not going to say he's been playing good, but he hasn't looked like the Andy McDonald from the beginning of the season. So I'll take that. I think he could be one of the guys that sits this weekend. Maybe he's a little older. He's not as fresh as some of these younger guys. Who knows? But I would definitely love to see Myers crack the lineup. If not, and when do they play? Saturday and Sunday?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe Sunday. Or he comes in fresh. Everyone played the night before. It would make sense. I don't mean to change the subject here, but on to Bailey. Did you see him play with the Phantoms when you went?
I did, yes.
How did he look to you? But I know he's like 6'4".
He looked all right. I believe he was on a line with Yori Laterra, which by the way, we'll talk about Laterra for a second here. He scored a goal right in front of my face.
It was out of spite. He knew you were sick.
Oh God! I was in the second deck, right above the opponent's net, and he scored a goal. The lone goal that the Phantoms scored in that game. They didn't play very well that night, but it was the lone goal, and I was so befuddled when I found out that it was him.
Did you cheer?
Some kind of fucking cosmic justice came through. I had to watch a Yori Laterra goal in person.
Jesus Christ. But Justin Bailey, because he's 6'4", I'm watching him. I know he only played 5 minutes last night. And I got to be honest, I haven't watched any of his games with the Phantoms. I haven't watched any clips or anything of him. He's 6'4", but he plays kind of smaller. He doesn't really play into his body. He's kind of like a tall, skinny dude. And from what I've seen, is he kind of gets bodied off the puck kind of easily.
He really does, and I think that's part of the reason why he's never really, been able to make it at the NHL level. He doesn't play, especially for a fourth liner, he doesn't play a very big game. And I think, especially, again, if you're on the fourth line, you should really be able to kind of hold your own physically. And he's not quite the best scorer, and he's not quite that tough, gritty kind of fourth liner that you need. And I think that's why he struggled at the NHL in the past. He really, he didn't play very well the night I was at the Phantoms game, but overall, he really was playing well with the Phantoms. And I think that he really needs to find that kind of extra level. And, I brought this up months ago on the Ombi Puckcast, but there's such a difference in talent level between the Flyers and Phantoms at the moment. So many of the Flyers' top prospects are still with their junior teams, and the Phantoms roster have so many interchangeable faces. A lot of the guys are still potential fourth liners. Vorobiev is up again. He was the one who sat in favor of Bailey against the Wild. He played 7 minutes against the Penguins. He played 9 against Anaheim, 5 against the Kings. But you have all these guys that are down there, whether it be Vorobiev or Bailey or Aube-Kubel or, Rubtsov or, all these guys that are good in the AHL but are nothing more than just your average fourth liner in the NHL. And I think that's where it's hard. The Flyers don't have the reinforcements right in front of them. A lot of their guys, the Frosts and Allisons and Ratcliffes and all those other guys are still in juniors. They don't really have those, those black aces to call up to help them out right now.
Yeah, that's a really good point because, I forget about that too. The Phantoms are kind of in limbo right now. They're kind of getting the Flyers scraps and, the leftovers from the teams of the past with the Phantoms. They have guys like Yuri Laterra, and they kind of have a bunch of like veteran AHL guys down there too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're kind of getting the short end of the stick, but they got the guys coming up. The cavalry's coming. Hang in there, Phantoms. You got some goalies coming. You got some prospects coming. Phantoms games are going to be fun.
Yeah, the one they played, I believe, against Sunday night, and they beat the Hartford, which is the team that they lost to the night I was there. They played a very rough game. They spent most of it in their end. Alex Lyon was in net. Like, Jesus God, I had to watch a Yori Laterra goal and Alex Lyon play. I was...
It's karma, man.
Oh, God, it was. It totally was. And then Myers got called up the morning before. I didn't get to see him. Sam Moran didn't get sent down yet. Still didn't get sent down as
what's
Wednesday
up with that?
night.
It is February. They said he'd be ready to go by...
He's been taking full practices for quite a few weeks now. I heard speculation that it might have to do with the trade deadline coming up, that they didn't want to send him down because he would have to be called up before the trade deadline. And given their current situation, we'll talk about this a little bit, the goaltenders are getting healthy, which puts them in a very awkward position in terms of what to do roster-wise. Brian Elliott was sent down for a conditioning stint. That would put them up. They are in limbo with Mike McKenna. I believe he is called up at the moment after serving his
That's correct.
Stint, yes. His rehab or his conditioning stint.
Mhm.
That puts them in a very interesting position. Obviously there's speculation that Brian Elliott could be the one traded at the trade deadline. They could send Mike McKenna down at any time. I don't think there should be a fear of losing him. Obviously he hasn't done, I don't know if has he played a game for the Flyers yet? Maybe one game?
He played one, I think. Yeah,
I think he
got
played one.
Pretty good.
Look that up here. And but like this goalie carousel is really kind of slowing things down at the trade deadline. That has been the rumor why they have not sent Sam Morin down. I think maybe he gets sent down potentially next week. That would leave his stint past the trade deadline.
I had read something, I think, earlier this week that they called up Mike McKenna. The point of all of it was so that the Canucks somehow got him back. I doubt through trade maybe they were going to waive him again, Mike McKenna, and the Canucks were going to pick him up. But apparently the Canucks didn't want to wait for all that, so they went and signed a goalie.
Yeah, they traded for.
They traded. There you
go. Mike Mazanik, I believe, who was with. Was it Mike Mazanik? What's the first name?
That sounds right.
Mike Mazanik. He was in net actually for the Phantoms game. For the Hartford game. Mike Mazanik. How the hell Mazanik?
Mazanax.
Right? Oh, I guess maybe it's not Mike. What's his first name? Mazanik.
The last name's definitely correct.
NHL Mazanik. Marek Mazanik. There we go.
Yeah, you'd have never got
knew it was
that.
something like that.
I would have never got that either, Marek.
I knew he was a prospect with the. Thought I was a hot prospect with the Predators at one point, but yeah, they Vancouver traded, I believe it was a 7th round pick for Mazanik because they weren't waiting for McKenna to come back if the Flyers put him on waivers, which they still haven't.
It's interesting too, isn't it?
Yeah, especially it's not like they really need him at the moment unless they're waiting for Elliott to come back from the conditioning stint just in case something would happen to Stolarz or Hart. But yeah, I don't know what they're doing here. I think they are against the player contract cap or their 23-man roster, something like that. I know there's some extra BS going on here that is preventing them from just making these moves, but yeah, the fact that they've not sent Sam Morin down yet, that is not looking good for him to see a whole lot of ice time this year, especially now that they called Myers up. If he sticks around long term, could be another very disappointing season for Sam Morin, which that's a shame. Makes me sad.
It really is a shame because I like the style that he plays. I like his attitude. I like his personality. I think he would fit in well with a team like this. I think they honestly are missing a type of player like him, not just on the ice, but in the locker room. He just seems like they have a guy like Simmons. Morin kind of seems like that. He kind of reminds me of like a Hartnell-ish, Pronger-ish type personality, where he's kind of got an alpha dog personality, but he knows how to joke around and be one of the guys too.
From all reports I've heard, over the past couple months, that he has been nothing but positive and in high spirits over his comeback and his rehab and comeback. And I'm a big fan of him and his playing style. I know a lot of the fancy stat assholes have no time for players like Sam Morin, but I still firmly believe in role-playing defensemen. I think that guys like him are going to be important. I don't think he's going to be I don't think he's going to be in the top 4. I don't think he's going to play huge minutes, but I think he's going to play very important minutes. I think especially on the penalty kill, which has been all over the place for the Flyers this season, he could definitely bring some solid help back there. But I just want the kid to have a chance. So many people have written this guy off, and he hasn't even had a chance yet. He's played 3 NHL games, 4 games over the past 2 years, and it's just like, how can they write off somebody who doesn't even have a chance?
Yeah, really good points, and it's a shame because I would love to see him up here. I think Philly would love him up here, and I think a player like him is necessary when you got a guy like Sloth over in Pittsburgh swinging his stick at people's friggin' heads. You need a guy like Sam Morin. He might make you think twice.
Yeah, he certainly wouldn't. He would make Evgeny Malkin much uglier with a couple fists to the face.
Yeah, I don't even know if that's possible. It would probably be improvement.
Would be hard to do. Make him look better.
Seriously.
Go from like a -3 to like a -2. Let's see. Carter Hart. Did we talk about him yet?
I don't know how he did. No.
I don't know how he didn't either. Well, maybe because he didn't play the majority of these past couple games. But Carter Hart tied Jocelyn Tebow for an 8-game win streak before his 21st birthday. That got crapped all over in the Pittsburgh game, unfortunately. He did not look his best during Pittsburgh. He allowed a very soft 5-hole goal because he did not get from post to post quick enough. But overall, it's a record. It is what it is. He tied it. Moving forward, it's gone. It's out of his way. He can get back to playing hockey. He will more than likely play one of the Red Wings games, given they're back-to-back. Stolarz will probably see the other. That should be a good game for him to get back on track.
Yeah, totally agree. And can I just say this? Just because I just want to say it. Jocelyn Tebow is one of my favorite hockey names of all time. I just love saying that name. Can we one of these shows? Can we make a list of like greatest hockey names? Because I think Jocelyn Tebow is just a typical, French hockey name.
We can absolutely do that. I'm gonna write that down right now. Actually, hockey name.
That's a real hockey player name. You don't see any baseball players named Jocelyn Tebow or football, basketball.
There's Tim Tebow.
Yeah, there you go.
Spelled differently though.
Yeah, maybe a D Jocelyn or something like that.
Jocelyn Thibault, if you're not French.
He had a pretty solid career. He was a good goalie.
Let's see. I have his stats up in front of me here. He played 586 NHL games with a .275 GAA and a .904 save percentage, mainly with the Canadiens and Blackhawks. Yeah. Believe he was it him that did something spectacular against the Flyers in a playoff series? I'm sure he did at some point.
Yeah, not off the top of my head, but probably.
I don't remember. Need to look it up.
Hey, you know who else had a pretty solid milestone? And I didn't even know goalies could do this, but Roberto Luongo started his 1,000th game, I think, over the weekend. That's a lot of friggin' games for a goalie.
I believe he's only the third to do that, if I remember correctly, but behind Juan Brodeur.
That's a pretty incredible accomplishment.
Goalies. I've always liked Roberto Luongo. He's always one of my favorites, especially during his time in Vancouver. He was always pretty good. I was a big fan of his growing up. So,
yeah, I never really. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm looking up his stats, just trying to buy some time.
Well, I never really looked his stats up before, and I was looking at him the other night, and he never really had a bad year. I think he was hurt for a year or two, but up until this year, when I have him on my fantasy team, he's never had a bad season.
Oh, he's still going strong. He has dealt with quite a few injuries recently, but overall, he's still playing well. Let's see here. Games played. He is, yes, one of three. He's in second place. Brodeur has 1,266. Roberto Luongo's at 1031, and Wah is at 1029. Fourth place would be Terry Sawchuk with 971.
Wow. How many more years till Carter Hart's on that top five?
How many games has he played? 17? Usually I write this stuff down, but he didn't have a big week this week, so I didn't write it down.
Sorry, throwing curveballs at you.
Yeah, that's okay. We have wasted enough time tonight. 18 games. So, 82 games a year. I'm not good at math.
Just round this up here. We'll say
let's see here.
14 years.
Calculator.
He will be up there.
1,000 divided by 82. It's a little over 12 years if he played every single game.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it'll happen sooner or later.
Absolutely, it'll happen.
He is, let's see here. Little plug here. You can find his countdown with me at Heart Countdown on Twitter. He has 681 wins left until he passes Martin Brodeur for first place, which I believe is only a little over 8 seasons. So, there you go.
He'll do it in less than 8 seasons somehow.
He'll figure it out. Carrying this team on his back should count for 2 wins every night anyway.
He really has been. I think we talked about it on our last week's show, but they haven't really gotten anything together on the defensive end. I think the Anaheim game, I don't count that for anything because Anaheim is absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
I think they fired Carlisle almost immediately after. The Pittsburgh game, I think they only gave up 27, 28 shots, something like that. I think most of the game was played down the Pittsburgh zone. But I'm not sure. You know what, Dan? I'm not sure if that benefited Hart or not. Because, like you said, he kind of gave up an un-Carter Hart-like goal. And I think at that point, the Penguins only had 12 shots. And I think that was that in the second period when he gave that up?
I believe it was at the very end of the second period, yeah.
Very end of the second, the Penguins only had 12 shots. So, I mean, you used to play goalie. I mean, did you enjoy seeing more shots rather than less throughout the course of a game?
I always enjoyed seeing more shots. Now, I was playing, in high school, we didn't see a whole ton of them, but it was one of those things that, like, when you're seeing more, you feel better. You're more comfortable with what's going on. You're not just sitting there watching the game. You're kind of involved. And I always felt like it was better, when you're seeing more shots. But as well, when you're that late in the game in the second period and you've seen, less than 20, it's kind of like, man, this kid really is just kind of sitting there watching the game. The Flyers were on the attack most night. But I think you bring up an interesting point there. The team around Carter Hart, they went on a 9-0-1 streak, but for the most part, they're not playing a whole lot better. They have been getting help from their middle six scoring. Van Riemsdyk had 2 power play goals against Minnesota, and Patrick has been playing much better, and Voracek's racking up the points. But overall, this has not been a very good Flyers team. They're just getting more production from players that they weren't getting them from for the first couple months of the season.
Yeah, I mean they don't really wow me until the game is over. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like they haven't thoroughly dominated anybody. And like I said, I'm going to throw the Anaheim game out the window.
Yeah.
I'll give them credit for jumping on them early and finishing the game, not allowing them back in. But they haven't destroyed anybody. Like they haven't come out of the gate flying and I'm like, wow, they're going to win tonight. It's always kind of like, man, I hope they can get this one. I hope they can pull this one out. And then when they do, I'm like, okay, 8 in a row or 9 out of 10, And then it made me think after the Pittsburgh game, does Carter Hart need to see 30 plus shots? Does he need to see 35 plus shots a night? Does he want that? Because if I'm a goalie and I'm only seeing 12 shots halfway through a game, I lose focus like that anyway. It doesn't take much for me. But if I'm a goalie and I'm sitting there and on my pads and I'm watching this game being played, and all of a sudden I got to get ready to stop a shot, I might let one by.
I believe it is previous. I think we talked about this last week. Like, he was facing 45 shots a night for like 2 or 3 games in a row there. Was it the Bruins and Oilers or something? And it's just, he was being completely thrown to the wolves and he's playing well. And then a game like Pittsburgh comes where he isn't playing completely lights out like he usually does. When he's playing good, not great, all of a sudden the team around him gets exposed completely because they're very much relying on their goaltenders. And I think we saw that a little bit last night with Anthony Stolarz in Minnesota as well, where, Stoli did not have the best night. But again, the team around him, especially the defense, didn't do him any favors.
Absolutely not. And it's pretty easy for me to jump all over Stoli because he didn't have his best game as a Flyer. But he also had to face 39 shots. I mean, I know it's the second game of a back-to-back, and they had to travel and fly up to Minnesota. But come on, guys, like help him out a little bit. Like if it's blocking shots or we're keeping teams to the outside. And these weren't like gimme shots. These were like quality scoring chances where he's flopping all around over there. Like, thank God they won. I'm grateful for that because if they would have lost last night, I think, the season would have been basically over. So thank God they won. But giving up 40 shots a night is not going to cut it.
Yeah, I think it's the interesting part about their roster currently. We were talking about this a little earlier, but like their defense is here. this defense that we've been waiting on for years and all these players coming, like, they're here now. Now, Gostisbehere's not having a very good season. Provorov isn't having a very good season. Andrew McDonald was still trash, and, Gudas can't carry the team by himself, and, Sanheim is doing much better under Gordon because he's given a chance, but he's still not at the point where he can carry the team either. But it's like, I think it's very clear their top priority this summer should be finding somebody. And again, I'm not saying it, but Erik Karlsson will more than likely be a free agent. Like, throw your hat in the ring there. Bring somebody back there that can kind of help this team overall, because I don't know if this defense core is going to be as bulletproof as we once thought.
Yeah, you bring up good points. Let me ask you something here. I mean, because there's been kind of like quiet battles on social media over the one Shane the Ghost Gostisbehere.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not advocating that the Flyers need to trade him. Oh, the deadline's coming. Let's get something for him. That's not what I'm saying. I posed a question a couple days ago asking, what does Shane Gostisbehere bring to the Flyers that is so irreplaceable that you can't move him? Why are people so against moving him? I'm the type of guy where I'm intrigued by the unknown. I would throw his name out there just to see what teams would propose back. And if I can improve my team, I know that I need a shutdown guy. I know that I need a 3C. Let's just see what teams offer for a guy like Shane Gostisbehere, because I know. And when I ask that question, I don't ask it not knowing what kind of player Shane Gostisbehere is. Okay, like I watch him just as much as anybody else. I know that he's got a cannon of a shot. I know he's got excellent vision, but I also see his shortcomings. Like, how can you ignore those things? And for me, if your position is defense, then keep the mother effing puck out of your net, dude. Don't turn it over in your zone, and then create offense. Worry defense first and then create. Whereas with Ghost, I think he emphasizes too much offensively and almost forgets that he plays defense, and that really bothers me. I have a hard time watching that and being okay with that. That's why I bring up what about Ghost is so irreplaceable, and what I guess stops me from saying let's trade him is his contract. His contract is great. And what always kind of calms me down is, you know what, he's not getting overpaid. He's not making $6-7 million over 8 years. He's making 4.25 over the next couple years. And that's okay. That works. So that kind of brings me back. I'm not Angry Jim anymore. What are your thoughts about the Shane Gostisbehere talk?
I answer viewer questions every week on BPW Radio, and a question quite a few weeks back was, what are your opinions on the trade deadline? And I brought up Shane Gostisbehere. My take on Gostisbehere is he is a top caliber offensive defenseman, but he's not a very good defensive defenseman, which is, half the job of being a defenseman. He's on a very manageable contract. He has 4 years left at $4.5 million, which, given is good. I think we talked about this last week, that they're not, the Flyers aren't in any real cap trouble at the moment, so it doesn't matter one way or another. But the thing with Gostisbehere is he has shown that potential of being a guy. And again, his line mate Ivan Provorov this year struggled tremendously. It's not, it doesn't help him out at all when the guy who's supposed to be, this all-star defenseman isn't playing up to his level. Gostisbehere had 65 points last year. He's only at 25 this year. He's at a minus 17. I always try to approach this NHL thing as a business, and in terms of somebody like Shane Gostisbehere, he brings the positives and he brings the negatives. I think at this point he's still, when his offense is not producing like it has been this year, it's very easy for the negatives to but tremendously outweigh the negatives. But as far as a trade goes, I don't want to say no. I think Flyers fans on Twitter over the last 48 hours, couple days, have just been in complete hysteria over nothing more than a fan theory of trading Gostisbehere. But, there are positives and negatives. And I think if you're going to trade him, you better get a blue chip player prospect in return, because he has proven that he can hang when all things are going well. He had 13 goals and 52 assists last year. But it's not something that I would say, let's trade the guy. His value is at an all-time low right now. It wouldn't be ideal, but I would certainly listen to offers. I wouldn't go out of my way to shop him. I wouldn't go out of my way to, make him move or do whatever. Again, I think I would give him next season as well. I would, again, try and address the back end over summer, try and find somebody to come in and really kind of help this, take all the pressure off of Ivan Provorov, let Gostisbehere play his game. But again, what does he bring that others don't? He does bring that offense, and we've seen that. But Travis Sanheim, he has 21 points in 57 games. He has 5 goals and 16 assists. Gostisbehere has 5 goals and 20 assists this year in 54 games. So, it's just one of those things that I don't know what Sanheim's ceiling is. I think we're still maybe 2 or 3 years away from really truly finding out what he can bring to the table. If he could replace Gostisbehere, you have Phil Myers, who could, if his offense continues the way he was with the Phantoms, he could replace Gostisbehere offensively. But I think as far as a trade goes, it is far too early to pull the trigger on anything unless you get something phenomenal in return.
No, and I agree with that. I mentioned earlier in the season, if the Flyers typically don't make player moves during the season, and I don't think that Gostisbehere is the type of guy that I would want picks and prospects back for. I would want, if they could pull it off a 1-for-1 trade or 2 roster players type thing. I wouldn't trade him just to trade him. But knowing that the Flyers defensive stable is full and they have guys coming and they have more coming, I would certainly listen. Like you said, I don't think I would necessarily shop him, but that teams are going to call. And then also, and I'm not knocking what you said or anything, but I've seen guys come back with, his value's at an all-time low. Okay, well, why the hell would they ever trade him while his value's high? Like, of course, if his value's high, that means he's
then you're not going to want to trade him. Yeah, the rumors won't be there.
Exactly. So, no. A player's value, I think, I can only assume, obviously, but I think when trading for a player, especially as young as Ghost, who's, I think, 25, 26, you look at his production as a whole, and then I'm going to assume that they watch tape from the season and things like that and assess what he's been doing well and what he can improve on. If he would fit with the team, if he's not fitting in with the Flyers, whatever it is. But obviously, if his value's high, why would they say, let's go trade him now, right? Yep. So the only time that they ever would think about trading a guy like Ghost is if he's not working out with your team, which I guess some people would translate to as his value's low. But that is what it is.
Yeah, looking at the Flyers roster, I know we talked about this a little earlier, but Gostisbehere, Gudas, Haig, McDonald, Myers, Provorov, Sanheim, and then Sam Morin would be around as well. In a perfect world, this summer I would get rid of Gudas, Haig, and McDonald one way or another. That would leave Sanheim, Provorov, Myers, Gostisbehere, and Morin. That's a solid group of 5 right there. You bring somebody in. Let's just shoot for the stars here and say they somehow snag Erik Karlsson. That is a defense core, and really anybody else. I know there aren't a whole lot of huge names defensively, but let's just bring in a top 4 guy. A guy that's capable of playing top 2 if you really want to, but a top 4 guy. You have this defense that really, I think, kind of needs help in the two-way sense. And I think that's something that Radko Gudas and Robert Haig both bring to the table this year that, they don't really have now. You got Provorov, who's been kind of pegged as this two-way guy, and I think he can play a very well two-way game, but he's better served as a defenseman. Sanheim has been a pretty well-developed two-way game as well, though again, I think he's more served as an offensive guy. Myers will probably end up being a pretty strict offensive guy if I had to guess. They do need help, and again, I think this is where Moran will play a big role, especially if given the opportunity to kind of be that stay-at-home guy to let somebody like Shane Gostisbehere play his game. I have dreamed of a Sam Moran, Shane Gostisbehere pair for years now. And I think seeing that, and especially in this scenario, you put Moran back there, tell him, don't do anything stupid, and you let Shane Gostisbehere go up and play his game, then that should immediately help him be a better guy. Or the other thing I saw today on Twitter was, hey, convert Shane Gostisbehere to a forward so he doesn't have to worry about defense. And I'm like, hey, not a bad idea.
I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, it could happen. They have enough defensemen where they could experiment with things like that. I just want to throw this out there. I don't not like Ghost. I'm just kind of I could go either way. He does have a rocket shot, and to me, it seems like they're trying to let him, allow him to shoot with that shot a little bit more on the power play. I noticed during the Pittsburgh game that
I noticed it specifically over the past 2 or 3 games as well, that he was really taking some shots from the point.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't think it's any coincidence that the power play is starting to put up some numbers again. Because even obviously, I don't think he's getting any goals, but I think him getting shots to the net, and I emphasize to the net because he'll shoot a lot wide, kind of hoping for deflections, things like that. He's got such a rocket shot. If anything gets to the net, the goalie's either going to save it, and you have guys like Simmons or JVR kind of sitting there ready to put it back in, like we've been seeing, or he's going to score. The key is he has to get it on the net, and I know that sounds obvious, but he hasn't done it.
Yeah, I mean, he's just not going back to his rookie year when he had all those points, the 17 goals and 29 points, and he was tearing it up, and he was being the overtime hero when he had all these goals, and he was always playing, is just, I don't know if it's a confidence thing that his offensive game isn't going this year or what it is, but he just doesn't seem to be all there. Some have said it's an injury, which is very possible because the Flyers always play through injuries versus sit out and take the time that they need to heal. I don't know why they do that, but they do. But again, I just think Gostisbehere needs something. And it could be some help. I think they need help on defense overall. I don't think that this magic defense core that we've been waiting for years and years is going to be as good as once hoped, at least not in the immediate future. Maybe in a couple of years when Provorov is really a grizzled vet and Myers and Sanheim have, the appropriate seasoning to know their roles, maybe it'll help. But I think trying to fit Gostisbehere into this, role defensively that he's not really meant to fill, it doesn't help him. I think we used to see this all the time with Craig Berube. He would try and fit, he took a very, very offensive-minded team under Peter Laviolette and said, you guys are going to play defense now. Mm-hmm. And the system change didn't work, and that led to his eventual dismissal before being replaced by freaking Dave Haxtell, who didn't have a clue what he was doing and didn't install any systems. But, I don't know. It's been a whole thing, too. It wasn't even just under Gordon. He was struggling at the beginning of the year under Dave Haxtell. So all we can hope, I think, for Gostisbehere at this point is that it's just a down year. He rests over the summer, comes back, slots in with Erik Karlsson next year, and will be just fine.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I'll chalk it up to an injury. I'll give him some credit. I've been pretty tough on him. And a lot of that is because, maybe it's just me, but his body language is pretty shitty, and you see the reports about him yelling at fans, blah blah blah. I won't get into it, but I'm a little bit biased because I don't like that kind of stuff, man.
I would yell at fans too, to be fair.
Okay, yeah, I mean what I don't get, and I've made a conscious effort when I go to games not to yell shoot because like you don't think that they know that they have to score. You don't think that they want to shoot. Like give me a friggin' break with that. But I mean, it's hockey, dude. You're professional. It's every arena does it. Like I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way when I read that. So go say I agree with you though. Get him a solid defensive defenseman, and yeah, he'll be okay. I'm frustrated. Like I said, it's because I have that personal thing with him. If he would have just kept his mouth shut, goddammit, I would love you, Ghost.
Going back to the power play, I have not watched a whole lot of the Flyers in January and February for various reasons, but I noticed this during the Pittsburgh game. I don't know how long it's happened. Maybe you can enlighten me here. Why the hell are Giroux and Voracek switched sides on the power play? Voracek is on the left side and Giroux is on the right, even though Giroux has made a career on the left of the power play and Voracek is only useful on the right side anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know. Giroux obviously has that rocket shot down in the corner. Maybe they felt like teams figured them out a little bit and they were leaning towards that side. For whatever reason, it seems to be paying off. I don't know. I know the second line seems to be clicking a lot with Patrick on there. Coots has been playing very well, and he continues to play well. By the way, I'm not skipping over your question. I can only assume that they're doing it to confuse teams. I mean, they've been doing it the same way for so long. It hasn't really been working out this year. I assume that's why.
Because quite frankly, I didn't notice until, I believe it was the dying seconds of the Pittsburgh game. They were on a power play, and they were, doing their usual passing the puck far too much. And I noticed, I believe it was Gossesbear, passed it to the left side, and I was like, oh, Giroux's got a good shot here. And it wasn't. And Voracek is a lefty and Giroux's a righty, and I was like, wait a second, that's not right. Why didn't he take the shot there? Well, because it was on his bad hand. I was like, what the hell's going on?
Oh my God. You know why it is? Because they're probably trying to load up Shane Gossesbear at the point. That's exactly why, because they're both in perfect passing position. Right?
Yeah, they would be on the good passing hand.
Yeah, I think over the last couple games, especially in Pittsburgh, I noticed that they were down 2 goals in the third on the 5-minute power play towards the end, and they needed to score goals quick. And it seemed like they were trying to open up the D to get Ghost open for the shot. So I'm assuming that was the point of switching those 2 guys.
Yeah, I just noticed it in the Pittsburgh game, and it caught my attention. I don't know. I never really noticed before. I didn't know if that was new or what.
No, that's interesting. But I'm gonna keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, I gotta do a little more research for that. Let's see here. Power play did work well against Minnesota. Van Riemsdyk had 2 goals. Those were his first 2 goals in quite some time, it looks like. Last time he scored was January 28th against Winnipeg. My biggest issue, Van Riemsdyk now has 6 power play goals and 8 power play points. Oh, those aren't assists, points. All right. Even still, the majority, 8 points. He has 28 points on the season. My biggest issue, and I was not a super fan of the Van Riemsdyk signing in the offseason because I thought that they could have used that money to address bigger issues, whether it be on defense or, down the middle, which they desperately could have used a good center here. But Van Riemsdyk to me is the biggest issue. It encompasses the biggest issue for the Flyers, being that he's a rather one-dimensional guy. He's going to be that net front guy on the power play and kind of the power forward on the 5-on-5. But I just think the Flyers, I talked about role players on defense. I think they have guys on the forwards that are just there. The only real true dynamic guys they have as forwards are Giroux and Couturier. Everybody else kind of plays their game and struggles everywhere else. We talked about Voracek being on the wrong side. Like, Voracek and Simmons both are guys that you really can't move. They're guys that are career right wingers and have not succeeded anywhere else. I believe Hackstall tried Simmons on the left wing for quite some time, and it just never really worked. And it's like, I just think they could have hugely benefited from somebody like Ryan O'Reilly over the summer that brings, not only a two-way play to his game, but can produce offensively as well, that can kind of play anywhere you need him. And I just think they need more guys that can help offensively be more of an all-around player.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's the type of guy where he's more of a complementary player. You mentioned a guy like Ryan O'Reilly, and I was actually, when the Blues were kind of in the shitter, he was a guy that I would have liked the Flyers to kind of target as their second center, in front or behind Coots. Didn't matter. He's having an outstanding year with St. Louis. He's been a huge part of their turnaround. But yeah, JVR needs a specific type of player to play with, and I think that guy is Claude Giroux. And unfortunately, he's better suited, I think, in the long term playing left wing. So they're going to have to find somebody, or someone on the roster is going to have to step up, because JVR is not somebody who's going to create his own chances or chances for somebody else. He's a goal scorer, and he's not necessarily. I don't know if I would call him a pure goal scorer. A guy like maybe Patrick Laine, who's actually struggling this year. But and I'm not comparing the two. All right, so everybody chill out.
They were getting mad at you on Twitter already when you said that.
Yeah, I could feel it. Yeah. So JVR, all he's good for is goals, basically, and he needs somebody to set him up. He needs somebody to get him the puck in the dirty areas, whatever it is. And I think that we saw that a little bit last night. And I can only assume that that's the plan now on the power play. You mentioned Voracek and Giroux switching spots. We mentioned that it looks like they've been trying to get the puck to Ghost at the point a lot more often. And you have players like JVR and Simmons kind of hanging around in front of the net. And it seems to be working.
It's players like, and I just think that that's kind of why the Flyers offense is as unpredictable as it is because you got guys like Voracek who are wildly inconsistent when it comes to their game. Some nights he can go out there and look like a freaking superstar, and then other nights he goes out there and looks like he's never played hockey in his life.
Right.
You get Simmons, who's rather one-dimensional, especially at this point in his career, who's just, standing net front on the power play, hoping something hits him and goes in. Van Riemsdyk, more of a goal scorer, but again, I think he finds his major success on the power play versus just going out there and sniping. I think the Flyers organization probably is expecting somebody like Morgan Frost to come in and help with that. I think they're expecting, guys like Ratcliffe to come in and, make up for Simmons in a couple of years and Frost to come in and hopefully, whether it be next season or the following season, come in and bring something that this team lacks, and that's just dynamics. They need, in a perfect world, I would get rid of Voracek in the offseason, trade him for something, bag of pucks I would settle for at this point. But I just think they need those more dynamic players. They need players that can do a little bit of everything versus just a bunch of guys that are out there specializing in one thing that doesn't work out well. Because again, you mentioned it, the biggest success and the most success and really the only success Van Riemsdyk has had this season is when he's with Giroux. Throughout the whole year, it was so clear that he wasn't finding chemistry with anybody. And you got guys like Nolan Patrick and Oscar Lindblom who have been really good spark plugs. They're guys that are playing really well, but they're not getting the finish because they're out there with Voracek, who doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. They need guys like, I think that's the frustrating part. We talked about this on defense as well. They're guys that are just kind of there. They don't have a whole lot of on ice leadership in a sense of guys that you can count on being the overall good players. You got Giroux, who's, still an all-star, still a superstar, and you got Couturier, who has really, grown into his own as an overall really good forward, both offensively and defensively. You got to find guys like that. And I think they're probably counting on Morgan Frost to be, this offensive juggernaut that they haven't had in a long time outside of Claude Giroux. But overall, there's so many things that need to be addressed on this roster that I said it for weeks. I do not envy Chuck Fletcher right now. I would not want to be Chuck Fletcher. He's got so many things to address. And again, with the team that has been playing well, the thing has been, oh, well, Chuck Fletcher can't stray from the plans of fixing things at the trade deadline because the team's playing well. That is absolutely true. He needs to stick to his path. He needs to fix this team. He needs to worry about going into next year as an overall better team than they are this year.
And I agree with that, because if the goal is to win a Stanley Cup, you're not going to win it with this roster. You're not going to win it with Wayne Simmonds on your team for the next 3-4 years. He's 33, 34 years old. I would still look at it like, we're in a good situation where we can make the playoffs still possibly, and we could still tweak our roster. I think for somebody like me, I would look at this team and be like, okay, I have my work cut out for me. I have a decent core of players. But what I see when I look at this team is I see a lot of really good parts, but they're missing something to bring it all together.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I hope that he can address that, and I hope he does the right thing. I'm not sure what that move is, but I think when he moves Simmonds, we'll see what kind of direction he's really going to go, whether he's going to try to acquire more assets type thing, or if he can make some kind of an addition to the roster, which I don't think it's so far-fetched as people might think when looking back at past trade deadline deals. I'm hearing from a couple guys that Boston is extremely, extremely interested in a guy like Simmonds, especially after losing Pasternak. But I think, I'm sure he has deals on the table, all sorts. So I think the Simmonds move could give you we could see which direction he goes. Let's just say if he's going to acquire, first round pick and an asset, or if he's going to add a guy that can come up and play now.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think we'll find out what his game plan is when we see what gets returned for Simmonds.
Yep.
A first-round pick would be nice, but I think at this point it's time to stop playing that game. I think it's time to find young guys you can plug into the lineup now that are, 21, 22 years old, that are currently breaking into the NHL. I saw something earlier here. Let me pull it up on the old Twitter machine. Of course, I tweeted a whole bunch today, so I can't find it. Where is it? Oh, Simmonds to Toronto for a Kasperi Kapanen and a second rounder. I said, in a heartbeat.
Oh, hell yeah.
Whether Kasperi Kapanen would be the player, I still think he's got potential. He has struggled outside of, playing with Matthews and such, but overall, that would be ideal. Is young guy, if you can get a good pick with it, fine. But I think a young guy like Kapanen who has talent and potential to pop into the lineup now, and they can use him, to help bolster the offense. That's what you need. I think that's the best possible return for Simmonds. A first-round pick, again, would be nice. I just think it's time to stop playing that game and start building for the today versus 10 years from now.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, these guys everyone's going to get old pretty quick. I mean, and I'm talking about guys like Giroux, if Voracek's still here. And then the younger guys, the 20-year-olds, 20, 21, 22, 23, 2 years is going to go by quick. I mean, you have to start making moves for now. I don't want to hear, let them gain experience, because everybody was in that playoff series last year. I don't want it. I'm tired of first-round exits. And I know it doesn't, what the Flyers do doesn't depend on Angry Jim, how Angry Jim feels, blah, blah, blah. But dude, it's time to get out of the first round. It's been a while. Like, let's start winning some series. The ultimate goal is supposed to be the Stanley Cup. Let's start making Stanley Cup moves. You know what I mean?
Well, they have a 2% chance to make it to that first round of this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Waited a little bit too long with that Hackstall trigger there. I mean,
yeah, they waited about 2 years too long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Understatement.
Well, boys and girls, we have talked for a long-ass time tonight, but that's okay because we do not have a brotherly pod this week, so we can talk a little longer. Yeah, the Flyers, upcoming schedule. Of course, I closed that tab. Well-oiled machine here at the Angry and Negative Show. They have a back-to-back with the Red Wings this weekend. Lightning, Canadiens, Penguins, Sabres, Blue Jackets until the end of this month. Gonna be a tough one. Again, I will take no excuses if the Flyers lose to the Red Wings. There is no reason that they should. They're gonna keep their hopes alive. All the Flyers can hope for at this point is that the teams in front of them take some losses here and there, give them a fighting chance, boost that 2% up to at least a 4% chance to give us all some hope again. But, yeah, that has been it for the Angry and Negative Show. Jim, you want to get any plugs on before we go?
Yeah. So I just did a show with Jack and Derek of Philly Sports Network. Look out for HW Radio. It's going to be up tomorrow. Angry Jim every Sunday. Real quick, the Penguins are beating the Oilers with 2 minutes left in the second,
God
2-1. So, yeah. So maybe the Oilers can do something right for once. They do have Connor McDavid, but
unlikely.
Yeah, unlikely. So, yeah, that's all I got. Look out for the HW Radio show tomorrow. And we did change our name. So if you see HW Radio, it's still us. So that's my plug.
All right. Well, you can find me at Dan the Flyer Fan. You can find the site at Brotherly Puck. You can find this show as well as all the other shows we do at Brotherly_pod. If you want to count down Carter Hart's wins with me, you can do that at Hart Countdown. You can follow the other show, other podcast at O&B Puck. We have a live event coming up at Steam Pub in Southampton on the 24th. I will unfortunately not be in attendance. I have to work that day, but I will be there in spirit. Go out and support the guys. They are having the Daily Puck Girls. They got some PSN crew coming as well, so that should be a fun event for everybody there. Go support them. That'll be the day before the trade deadline. Angry and Negative Show, we will probably return next Wednesday, the 20th. Look out for an O&B on Monday, the 18th. You got a Brotherly Pod with somebody Jim is familiar with, his partner on High and Wide Radio. Jack will join me on the 22nd of Brotherly Pod. So we got 3 shows next week. That'll be fun.
Week.
It'll be a busy week, yeah. And then the 25th, Jim and I will return to talk all the Flyers. Hopefully big, crazy, fun trade deadline moves on the 25th. So check that out. We will be back with you next Wednesday. I've been Dan the Flyer Fan for Angry Jim. Good night, good hockey. We will talk to you next week.